interesting panel. We see all friendly faces here. It's going to be an interesting discussion. So we're going to be talking about funds and tokenization basically, or more specifically the tokenization of investment funds. That's why here we have mostly people from the venture funds background. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So we have here Saeed Darmaki, who's the CEO of Sheesha Finance. We have Vineet Budki from Cypher Capital. We have Oliver from Investment Ventures. And also we have Ajit Kuran from Reflexico. That's not Okay, we have a last minute change. So maybe you want to make your own intro.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Fernandes, co-founder of AdLunam, investment platform.
Perfect, great. So let's kick it off. Well guys, let's just start directly with the topic. So tell me, what do you think about the tokenization of investment funds? So do you think that kind of the tokenization of securities in general is the future of investment? And how do you think that essentially tokenizing investment funds would benefit the end consumer and the investor? So shall we start from here, Saeed?
Yeah, I think especially with more and more institutions looking to explore the blockchain and crypto space, I think that tokenization will continue to grow. I remember people talking about tokenization back in 2018, and I was one of the first investors in a tokenization platform called Securitize, which I think recently did a Series B or something. So they are growing. So I know that the tokenization use case is definitely growing and has been growing over the last few years. Maybe not as much as the hype when it was back in 2018. There was a lot of hype around it. That hype died down, and the people that are actually building things that are useful for tokenization are still in the market and they're still doing well. But I think liquidity is also important, so I think with the tokenization of any asset, whether it's an investment fund or real estate or bonds or whatever you want it to be, I think you need to have the liquidity there, and I think you need to have the buy-in of liquidity providers and participants in that market for it to really make a difference.
Indeed, I think the liquidity is a very important point. Oliver, what do you think is maybe the key factor that is going to help kind of the more common adoption of tokenization of funds?
First of all, we have to see tokenization of real-world assets is not regulated. So always the entrance key from an institutional point of view and to make it attractive, to get volatility and volumes to the market is to attract, let's say, a mass of investors. It can be not just be like retail investors, as we had the bullish market. The last one was mostly running by private investors. There are not really much institutional investors. So the question is how to get an environment which is, let's say, at least half regulated or partly regulated, so that institutional investors are comfortable to invest in. That's the first question. Second question is about adoption of the tokenization of investments. Do we talk about tokenization of real assets, or do we talk about tokenization of shares or company shares or whatever? It's also like a difference because there must be an economic reason behind it. So I cannot just tokenize shares. For example, the most of tokenization of assets at the moment is about tokenizing the shares of a legal entity, of an SPV, which are the assets in, but that's not really like tokenization of assets. So this must find a more clear definition. And then also, of course, we had a panel in the morning about carbon credits, and the guy were not very positive about it, what I understand. But on the other side, the question is, okay, what are the entrance steps to tokenize it? So when something can be on a regulated platform or a non-regulated platform, and I'm not a friend of regulations, it needs to be unregulated that we have a growing market, but at one point to make it more attractive and also the volatility higher, the volatility on the market, it needs a specific kind of regulation at the end of the day. So in a nutshell, from an institutional point of view, is about how I can eliminate the risks of my investment. And to eliminate the risk, I need at least a minimum entrance criteria of regulations.
Exactly. I'm happy that you mentioned the minimum entrance criteria because currently the main issue maybe with traditional assets is the access. So usually most of the assets are accessible only to accredited investors, and obviously this is for regulatory reasons and more for protection of the end user, right? So accredited investors basically are more capable of evaluating the risks involved with a more complex financial product. And essentially tokenizing such a product means that you give access to everyone, you democratize it. So in certain, from certain point of view, this is something really positive. On another point of view, it kind of increases the risk for the average user, right? So Vineet, what do you think about tokenized funds?
So before I answer this question, let me just get the public involved. So guys, how many of you trade actually? How many of you guys trade actively on Binance or any of the exchanges? Has anyone done a 70x or a 100x so far in life? No, right? So Saeed here gave me my first token which did a 70x. He gave me enough tokens that did anything from 300x to whatever. In fact, if I remember, Casper did 1000x on start.
It's good old days.
Those are good old days. So now imagine VC funds have access to deals which end up doing 70 to 100x and we sell it to the retail. Retail is the guys who are trading it. Now imagine getting access to a fund like that. That is known as tokenization of funds. You know, normal people do not have access to such opportunities. And this is where this whole concept of tokenization comes. But the critical part is, who is building the tokenized fund? Is it someone like Saeed who is having 8 or 9 years plus experience in the crypto space? Or is it a kid sitting in Vietnam under a people tree, building up, investing into projects? So I think tokenization of funds is a good way to do it. A lot of DAOs did it last season. CSP DAO was there, Crypto Avengers was there as well. Next season also, I think this will be a way to give access to a lot of retail people to get into projects earlier. But again, who's managing the operation becomes critical. What is the investment type becomes critical. And hopefully, you know, people look at projects like Sheesha, which is nearly similar stuff.
Let me add here something. I mean, sorry when I just jump here in, but what Vineet said is true. On the one side, we have better offers, let's put it on the way, of investments. On the other side, it's always easy for private person making 1000x, 500x or whatever. But for a VC in a professional way, we cannot scale tokens. And that's the reason why only pure VC investments in tokens from fund side is difficult, because let's imagine you have 100 million, you make 50,000 tickets. So of course, you can take the opportunity in a bullish market, but you never will be able to manage and to maintain it in a bear market in which we are. So there are two sides. On the one side, we have cheaper access, we have better access to the projects because we are much global, especially Cypher Capital, because they're also incubator companies. But on the other side, it's always easier for a private person to leverage an investment in a token with a small amount as a VC with bigger amounts. Also for a VC, don't want to have like someone who is controlling 2 or 3% of the tokens, because you can manipulate easily the prices then. Just to add this.
Exactly. I think here the differentiation is important. We started it a bit more general in terms of digital assets or tokenizing of traditional capital market instruments, but obviously digitalizing and giving access to already a blockchain VC is way more possible and easier. And I guess that here Jason can tell us a bit more, because their platform is doing exactly that.
Yeah, so I could say there's really two sort of topics here. One is sort of tokenization of funds, and the other is sort of tokenization of real assets. So you mentioned securitize. That's really allowed a lot of sort of retail investors to get involved in sort of the disbursement of funds in the crypto space. And I think one of the challenges around both tokenization of funds and tokenization of real assets is sort of the regulation around it, right? So the regulation is different in different countries. There's not really sort of uniform understanding of what is even a security. That's sort of based off of the Howey test, which is multi-pronged, and even if all those prongs are satisfied to some extent, you know, you could still be a security. So I think like that's something that really needs to sort of resolve itself over time. Sort of the security regulations.
Interesting. So since Vineet already picked up the topic about returns, I'm also personally interested in that, and I would always use the opportunity on an investment panel to see what our investors are actually thinking, what they're investing in, what their portfolio holds. So let's start with Saeed here. They have some pretty interesting projects under Sheesha Finance. So Saeed, tell us, what do you think? Like, what is the current trend that you're seeing? Where are we currently in the cycle, and which are the subsectors that you find interesting?
I think the most interesting kind of projects that I feel towards is ones that are actually leveraging multiple emerging technologies. I think the latest hype has been around AI, and we are looking at AI projects, but we actually really want to see substance and long-term potential instead of just, talk and claiming they're using AI or whatever, but actually like the tech is really integrated and can be used, and the platform uses it that the project suggests. So I think AI is great and it's hyped, but I think there has to be substance to it, and I think if you link that with blockchain technology or with metaverse and NFTs and all the different use cases out there, I think it makes it a more interesting package. But more recently, it's been metaverse and AI-related projects that are kind of hyped up. But we look across all the different use cases out there, and as long as there's long-term potential, then we'll definitely take a closer look.
So you say metaverse and AI. Okay, let's continue. Who wants to take it next? Vineet?
Okay. Actually, we have been looked to a couple of startups which are in the field of tokenization of real-world assets, because we believe tokenization of real-world assets will be, let's say, a key for success in the future. Yeah, this is what we believe. So we have different projects. We also just invested in one project in Bali, Ekta, and we launched it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They have this is a family office which have a lot of like 5-star hotels and all this kind of stuff, which they're trying to tokenize. Here we like the model because it doesn't matter what kind of token you do or what you tokenize. It's always about the user case and the adoption of the user of this product. Because here in Ventures, we are investing most likely only in projects which have a real traditional the adoption of technology, Web3, to traditional industries. Because otherwise, for VC, it doesn't make sense, because we need a real user case, because we want to have an exit at one point. So Ekta is one of the projects, for example, which we invested actually I think they're still raising funds, so I think people are welcome there. It's a very nice project. And we invested in this one because they had a clear legal framework. The other ones which we talk in Europe, Brazil, also like here in the MENA region, they cannot present a real, let's say, clear legal framework in what we invest in. So as we are like a serious investor, for us also to protect let's say the money for what we are responsible, it's one question is about the legal framework, especially by tokenization. It doesn't matter if it's like real-world assets or funds, but at the moment I don't see really tokenization of investments. It's a very early stage, and here we still don't know how this will be or how the market will be developed in the future.
Vineet?
So before answering this question, we need to also understand the evolution of the investment markets. 2017, everyone and anyone was raising funds in ICO. They were planting trees in Africa and said, this is blockchain, and raised millions of dollars. I think 2021, people came up with real use cases. You had Aave, you had Compound, where you could lend, borrow, you had KYC that could be done on Fractal. And again, the next season is all about adoption. It's not, there are use cases that have come now. Thing is about how will you get the next billion users on blockchain? Otherwise, it will be zombie chains and zombie apps that will be there. Like in the bear market, everyone was saying, oh, we are investing in infrastructure and L1s. So we have 36 L1s, out of which probably 10-15 are zombie chains. Zombie chains meaning zero apps working on that. I'm pretty sure most of the apps that we've worked on are on Ethereum or Matic or Binance. So for us, looking at that, we are investing in things that have user potential, getting users on board. So things like Play to Earn. Again, last season Play to Earn was more hype-based. But if you look at the games that are coming up right now, they're really AAA plus games. We are looking at real-world assets. How you can tokenize things like real estate, hash rate, and stuff like that. We're looking at what else are we looking at? Okay, KYC, that is something that we are doing. Digital identity is something that we are looking at strongly.
And also KYC in DeFi, right? I think that's a very interesting topic these days.
Yeah. And finally, we have also invested a lot on NFT platforms. Again, people think that NFTs are dead. I sold a lot of tokens last season. I never looked back. I sold my 5 NFTs and I've been crying from that day, and I've been trying to figure out how to buy them again, because there's an emotional connect that comes when you buy an NFT. A token is a token. An NFT is something that attaches to you. So for us, that's why NFT platforms have been key. We have invested in 5 of the top NFT platforms. We have invested in Few and Far, that's backed by Pantera. We have invested in Symbol, that's backed by Google Ventures. We have invested in BitsCrunch, backed by Animoca, as well as NFT3, which is backed by again Animoca. And finally, we did the Magic Batch, which is Matic's NFT platform. So these are 4 or 5 things which I think will get a lot of users on board, and that's where the bull run will start from.
Interesting. So you say KYC, play to earn, and also NFT platforms. Yeah, that's as a summary. Okay, up to you, Jason.
Sure. So if we're talking about like the landscape in 2023, the 3 best performing projects, 4 best performing projects in the top 10 are AI projects. So AI Pad, Crypto GPT, I think Sheen GPT. Those are like 3 out of the top 10 best performing projects in 2023. So we've seen a lot of AI projects be very, very successful in 2023. In 2022, as you mentioned, it was sort of the metaverse. It's time for the metaverse, but I think that sort of faded as Facebook has become much less interested in tackling the metaverse. So we've seen like sort of the season that we have in 2023 is essentially an AI season. But I think what's going to happen in 2024 is we're going to see a lot of companies, sort of other businesses that are using AI to sort of do what they're doing better. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting to see sort of how does the AI industry work with the gaming industry. Like one of the companies I advise, a company called Project Lambo, has integrated AI into their game to where essentially the non-playable characters are voiced by AI, right? So you have essentially a real-world use case of AI within a very different industry, like gaming, for example. So I'm curious to see how that would sort of influence other industries, like let's say the NFT industry. Let's say how would AI, let's say, enhance like a layer 1 or a layer 0 project? I'm curious to see how that will happen. I think 2024 is going to show us kind of how that's going to play out.
So I just want to add something. So there's a lot of talk about AI that's been happening a lot. Anyone has used any other app other than ChatGPT so far? Because other than ChatGPT everyone has used. Have you used anything other than that?
There is also Bing. Huh? There is also Bing.
Okay.
And what else?
Anything in crypto? You have used something, because my concern is that, we say, again, it's about how do you get the users, and do the users actually get to use those apps? The hype is great. Hype is known as a pump and dump rather than a long-term investment. So I see, metaverse and stuff like that, there's a lot of hype around it. We'll make money, but long-term also we have to see whether we are using them.
Definitely. Well, from what you all had said, I noticed definitely a trend of AI here, but I'm quite interested that you missed to mention interoperability, which was like kind of a topic of every single kind of for the past maybe 6 months. So don't you still see the gap? I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, look, blockchain technology is still nowhere near developed enough to support so many use cases out there. It has the potential to, but I think the technology needs to develop much further for us to be able to kind of, really apply it to multi-applications across multiple countries, across multiple jurisdictions, and that interoperability will come into effect or become more needed as and when more people use applications that are related to blockchain in different spaces, different countries. So interoperability has definitely been a theme that developers have been looking at, and there are projects that are trying to tackle that situation. But I think the technology in general needs to develop enough for interoperability to be needed more than it is currently.
Okay, let's go back to tokenized assets. I think that Oliver mentioned something really important in the beginning, that mostly currently the projects that we're seeing, the kind of structure that they operate under is basically an SPV that's tokenized, so it's no different than basically offering shares, but just under a different kind of regulation or kind of the surpassing of the lack of it. So based on the projects that you had seen out there that are tokenizing any kind of investment products or real world assets, what you maybe noticed as a very successful example of it, or maybe a very unsuccessful example, that would be also interesting. Okay, Oliver, you go.
No, please.
Well, I'll just say that real estate is probably like the most obvious real world asset that's tokenized. It's been fairly successful. But in terms of not successful, maybe somebody else would like to try.
About real estate, I have something actually to mention. Well, most of the real estate is actually tokenized exactly through an SPV, right? And currently we still don't have a way to fractionalize the title deeds. So exactly how do you see it as a successful example?
Well, it's different in different places, right? So for example, there's a company called Coin, which I advise. They've essentially, each property is essentially is a fractionalized NFT. And in order to buy that fractionalized NFT, which is a security, you need to have a utility token, which is the Coin itself. So you would only be able to buy that if, let's say, you were an accredited investor, or if you were otherwise able to purchase, a fraction in that particular real estate property. So if you did, then you'd be able to use the utility token to buy it. But then again, the NFT itself, the fractionalized NFT, is a security.
Okay, Oliver, to you.
So hash rate is something that has been tokenized well. Binance had launched a token known as BTCST. Again, what the concern that you mentioned is critical. You're buying a house, but the title deed is still offline. And I think Dubai has been trying to take things on, but in the end you have to land up at the land department. But things like which are digital in nature, hash rate is still digital in nature. There has been successful cases that have happened over there. What else? NFT fractionalization is also happening at on some of the platforms, but those are the two ones which I look at. But does it have a potential? Anything can be fractionalized. It's just that the rules should be there to get them going.
Exactly. The question is how you make it legal, actually, how you regulate it.
By real estate projects, if you are specific for this question, so what we're doing, we're looking for companies to tokenize either the cash flow, that's an easy way to do it, or to tokenize the debts. Because the debt market in Europe, the ETN market, is one of the biggest markets in the world. So there's already like an infrastructure, there are investors for it. Why real estate does not get tokenized? Because it's too complicated. It's just as a very simple answer to a complicated question. And as Vineet said, of course we can discuss putting real estate in an NFT and doing all these kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it always doesn't make sense from an economic point of view. And at the moment it doesn't make sense, so we have some projects of tokenizing villas and all these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, will it be a mass product? We don't know. Can it be like a highlight product? Yes, maybe. Yeah, so I would say that this you have to see a bit more critical, and not everything must be on blockchain on the tokens, or fractionized. But what is true is to make more people participating on investments, like fractionizing makes sense at one point. But the question is here, how much you want to do this, or how deep you want to go, and then it's coming also to a point, if someone investing $1, but to fractionize it is more expensive, it doesn't just make sense from an investment point of view. So I agree to say, okay, there is a future of tokenization of real world assets, and the same is with investments. Yeah, but how this looks like, I don't see the instruments at the moment, and I don't see the markets for it. So we can put it on a DeFi platform, we can trade on it, we can land it, we can package, we can wrap it, we can make tokens out of it and put it on other, we can give them an ISIN number and whatever. That's all easy. It's nothing. I mean, I'm coming from a regulated market. It's the most easy thing to give something an ISIN number and put it on a stock exchange, doing dual listings, it doesn't matter where. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for an investor to do it. If it doesn't make sense, so why should I spend time and money for it?
Perfectly agree. Actually, here I can give a very interesting example of a project that I came across recently. I think there are a lot of potential users in the trade finance, and the project is exactly doing that. So they're basically doing factoring for SMEs that, you know, it's normally very hard to access for the SMEs, and they're creating those kind of pools where people can stake their, let's say, USDT or any type of stable coin, and essentially the proceeds from the financing, the factoring of those notes goes to them as yield, and which is a pretty competitive yield compared to what you can get as USDT in the market. So it's kind of a bit more another level borrowing and lending structure. But I think that this is an interesting way of kind of tokenizing trade finance.
I think also you need to look at, is there a problem that exists with a specific instrument or an asset? So for example, with real estate, in the last century, with inflation going up, because real estate protects you against inflation, because when inflation goes up, real estate goes up. So now, compare yourself to 50 years ago. If you had X amount of dollars, you would be able to get on the property market. You would be able to get on a ladder, the property ladder. Now, if you have that same amount, it's impossible for you to get on the property ladder. So, real estate, tokenization of real estate, fractionalization of real estate, is something that solves a problem that, you know, students out there who are graduating, how can they get on the property ladder? People who are just starting a career at like 5 years into the career, they can't get on the property ladder. So if you provide an instrument, whether it's tokenized or not, that can facilitate or help people to get exposure to real estate without having to buy the whole asset itself, the whole unit. But then you need the fractionalization and the crowdfunding licenses and the regulation in place before you can use the technology and adopt it and people can start using it. So with crowdfunding, for example, not long ago, crowdfunding wasn't regulated or licensed in the UAE, but now it is. So that paves the way also for tokenization and fractionalization of real estate, and that's going to happen sooner or later.
Indeed, yeah, I think real estate has a lot of potential. It's mostly about providing access to investments to smaller investors and diversifying their portfolio. So I think that's a good example. Well, I see that we have 5 minutes left. I don't think we're going to be doing Q&A, but maybe kind of a closing remark from each of you on tokenization of investment funds. So maybe since we just ended with you, let's start with the other end, Jason.
Sure, so I think I can just sort of talk a little bit about what you were saying earlier. I think invoice factoring is a really good use case for tokenization in terms of really bringing in a lot of liquidity to small, medium enterprises that normally wouldn't have access to those funds and wouldn't really be able to run their businesses as efficiently. But then there are, of course, like less good use cases of factorization, so of tokenization rather. I know a project that's actually tokenizing dinosaur bones. So I'm not sure how many of you guys have wanted to own part of a T-Rex, but I'm actually skeptical that that will really take off. But I mean, of course, it really comes down to what you're tokenizing, whether it has value. Ultimately, it just comes down to value. If it has value, then it's worth tokenizing.
So my last remarks are more not on tokenization, but on generally the sentiment around. So, you know, people always discuss about bear markets and bull markets. Actually, the right time to invest is always the bear markets rather than the bull markets. You know, today, when you look at conferences, when people are coming to these conferences listening about these projects and investing, these are the guys who will make it big in the next season. So, whatever be the case, it's all about being at the right time and looking at the market from a long-term approach rather than just, you know, short-term that BTC is at 30,000. It will go up. Projects which are in this room might do amazing because when the bull run comes, you know, every kid sitting under the people tree will be here trying to pitch his project. But maybe look at investing right now, getting into the markets right now, and have a long-term approach. BTC has not gone down over a long term. You know, it was $10,000 just 3 years back, and now it's at $30,000. Similarly with a lot of these projects. So, I time to get it.
Well, I would say if someone have a really amazing project in tokenization of real world assets or investments, more than welcome to have a look with my team on it. And I mean, in Ventures, we also like an in-house studio, so it means if we really think a project is worth it, we're also helping to facilitate and to maintenance it and to network with it and to bring it forward. I would be very happy to see one, to invest in it, but so far there were all like spots somehow. It was not really, let's say, where we didn't feel comfortable. But if someone have a project, more than welcome to talk about it.
I hope it wasn't financial advice now.
Oh, it was definitely a financial advice. Delete it.
You're shooting yourself on the foot. No, I think with tokenization, specifically of investment funds, I think if it's an investment fund that's like really, really big in terms of AUM and is actually in demand, and people that are not sophisticated or not accredited investors want to get access to the exposure of that fund, then I think tokenizing of that investment fund would make sense, because when you tokenize it and it's trading on secondary markets, then it gives access to the smaller pocket sizes to be able to get exposure to that fund. And the same with any other asset. If it's something that's in demand and that people are going to start trading, once it's tokenized, then it makes total sense. So in terms of investment funds, I think that might take a while yet. Real estate makes a lot of sense. And then there's other kind of assets which you can tokenize, like you talked about factoring. I think anything that solves problem for SMEs is great, especially when it comes to banking and financial kind of services.
Indeed, I think in summary, basically, almost everything can be tokenized, but mainly it depends on the regulation, how fast the regulators will move with it, and how we actually make legal that ownership, right? The same way you're owning, let's say, a share or a bond, how you actually own that part through a fractionalized, let's say, NFT or token. So yeah, that's the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our great panelists.
Thank you.